Welcome to Seton Hill Sports Network. It is your host Dio Dessois, and I'm very proud to introduce our special and first guest of the show on today, Carolyn Hong. This is a very experienced journalist at Disney slash ESPN. Her career at Disney began about 15 years ago. Am I right?
Yeah, almost 15.
Almost 15. She was hired first as a coordinating producer to oversee various ESPN News and Sports Center shows. She previously worked with Michelle Harper, also known as Shelley, who is a beautiful and sacred soul here on the Hill. Michelle is also the person who allowed this whole thing to get set up. Is there anything you would like to share about yourself before we get started, Carolyn?
No, I mean it's been a great I feel like when you say 15 years, I feel like so ancient. But it's been a very rewarding time. Before I came to ESPN, I spent a lot of time in local news. So just, all told, it's just been a great time. Probably some of the best times of my life.
Okay, okay, nice. I've I've started my journey into journalism pretty, I'd say this year, so I'm on my way to that. All right, so the first question of the day is, what made you get into journalism?
Oh gosh. I think when I first started college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was an English lit major because I just loved reading and literature. But I knew that I would have to pursue a career that was outside of that unless I wanted to teach. And I wasn't really particularly interested in teaching literature. I just enjoyed reading it. So I'd always wanted to do some writing, and that kind of led me to getting involved, just kind of seeking out where I could do some writing and what would be a meaningful way that I could contribute writing.
When,
Um, so then I went to graduate school for journalism. I think, when I was young, I would watch a lot of 60 Minutes and those news magazine shows, and I was drawn to being a storyteller, and that's really how I started my journey.
okay. When you were younger and you were like really interested in writing, at the point, were you more doing like creative writing, like stories and like fiction stories, or more like essay persuasive kind of writing?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I really did enjoy creative writing actually. So, when I was talking to my parents about it, my mom was like, you have a gift with language and a good grasp of grammar. And she said, why don't you start proofreading some stuff? Just as to make some extra money. So I was proofreading economics reports, which were kind of boring, but
Yeah.
it got me um, thinking about better ways where I can kind of use my skills. So that was really kind of like the early part of that. And then, the more I thought about it, I thought instead of writing creatively, which I can always do on the side, can I turn my passions into a career? And that's what kind of led me to journalism.
Nice, nice. So when you did like start journalism, was it like a rocky start? Was it difficult to get into? Like like yeah.
So when I was a student, I did an internship, a non-paid internship actually. And my advisor had told me at the time, when you go into this internship, just do whatever they will allow you to do and learn as much as you can because you're gonna get so much more out of the classroom in terms of learning. Um, and so I would do everything I could just get that I was allowed to do. Just learn everything I could, talking with reporters, producers, directors. Um, and I would say, so yeah, it wasn't easy because I think you learn a lot of things when you're actually there, right? In a classroom setting, you learn some of the basics that you'll need, but nothing replaces a real life, uh, the real life action that is in a newsroom and the experience that you get from that. Um, so yeah, it's hard because the other misconception I think people have about some journalism, especially broadcast journalism is that it's a glamorous life. When I tell people I work at ESPN, they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's so great! You get to see all these events, and you
Yeah.
know, you get to go to the Super Bowl." And it's not quite like that. It's not that glamorous. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of long hours. You start living a very different life than some of your friends who have more of a 9 to 5 life.
Yeah, yeah. I've experienced that recently. Preparing for this interview, I kind of stayed up all night, like for like 2 days last week. So yeah,
Yeah. It's, you learn pretty quickly. I did. It's long hours. It's working on weekends, it's working on mornings, overnights, holidays. But I think that if you really have a passion for it, then you fight through some of those things, and a path will open up. It's rewarding for sure.
okay. Speaking of rewards, I did find out that you had the Edward R. Moreau Award. Uh, could you talk to us about what kind of emotion or like the feeling you had when you did receive that award?
So I had in local news received awards before, but the Murrow was really, uh, is one of the top awards that you can get in as a journalist. And to receive that award for, especially in out of sports journalism, because we were competing with news, um, it was just incredibly satisfying to know that we're being recognized for the hard work that we did on this piece. And that's when you realize that other journalists are understanding your worth and your value, your contributions. So yeah, it was very meaningful to me. It was thrilling. It was just a way to kind of tie a bow on all the hard work we did for the piece. So yeah, it was good. I'm not a big awards person, but that definitely was special.
Yeah, yeah, I can share that. I've received awards for like athletics, and it's just like I got it, but yeah. What piece of like content or like work are you like most proud of?
Oh man, there's so many stories we covered, especially when I did long form journalism. There were some beautiful pieces that we did that just explored a range of topics, but probably the most rewarding have been the ones that have uncovered wrongdoing. Um, I don't know if you saw we did a Michigan State piece where there were Michigan State athletes who were accused by women um, for sexual misconduct.
I did hear about
And
that.
the school was accused of not not really addressing it properly, the issues. Um, and it was painful. It was rewarding. I mean, it was just one of those experiences. We spent so much time looking through records, talking to people, getting people to talk to us, um, poring over police reports and trying to put that puzzle together. Um, and that, in the end, changed a lot of the way Michigan State handles these interactions, and how Title IX has changed. So that was really those kinds of stories where you can actually enact change are the ones that really resonate with me. Those are the ones I'm most proud of.
Nice, nice. On the other side of the spectrum, is there a piece of work that you're like least proud of, or like you feel like more work could have been done?
You always, I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of like a perfectionist, so you always want more time, but sometimes you just have to go with what you have. As long as everything's, journalistically sound and legally sound, then the art part of it, you sometimes wish you could tweak more. But there's nothing that I'm not proud of. Um I've been fortunate in my time to be well supported by the companies for which I've worked. So I've never felt like I've had to do a story that I didn't support.
Yeah.
Um, there was always an interest in the stories I've done, even, some of them that are more on the featurey side, the lighter side. Um, they might not be my cup of tea necessarily, but I've always been proud of the work because you're serving a different audience. It's a
Yeah.
chance to kind of, tap into different skills that you have.
Yeah. Next question. Is there a point in your career where you felt like giving up or like just quitting?
You know what? I did leave my career for 3 years, actually.
When
I
was
was
this?
I was in working in Washington, D.C. during when 9/11 happened. Um, and it was all hands on deck. Everyone in the newsroom was involved in the coverage, and it was day after day. And at some point, I just felt really burnt out. It was very emotional. It was, personally exhausting. And at that point, I was like, I need a break. I can't do this. Um, so I took a break and I said I would only do it for a year. And I took a PR job with a small company, and I really actually started to enjoy it because it was a totally different way of life where I was getting holidays off and I wasn't working more of a 9 to 5 schedule. Um, and I was getting to do a little bit of traveling. So it was really enjoyable. And so one year stretched into 3 years. Um, and then I felt the pull to come back into doing journalism. That's when I knew I really loved what I did because I was willing to leave kind of more of a personal lifestyle that I started enjoying, just, having the time that I needed off. When I was willing to leave that behind and dive back into, kind of a more uncertain future, that's when I knew I really enjoyed doing what I do.
Nice, nice. That's nice. Do you ever get like writers or like creators block?
Oh, sure. I mean, I don't know anyone who doesn't. Because after years of doing kind of similar stories, you try to find a way to tell a story differently. And so sometimes you really have to kind of fight your way through just kind of sounding like you're doing the same story again.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. You definitely get blocks because you write a line or you read a line and you think, you know what, it sounds like the same story you do every year, like right now we're going through it with NFL coaches.
Yeah.
There's obviously a time when some coaches are fired and then they start the hiring process again. And it's like trying to explore how do you tell the story differently. So yeah, for sure, I think that most people in this business feel like there's a time when they kind of get a writer's block.
Yeah. Do you have like a specific way or like a neat trick to like get yourself over the writer's block, or you just kind of just
Um, I don't know if there's one specific trick, but I try to tell myself like you're serving the greater good and shouldn't assume that, just because you've told this story X number of times that somebody who's reading it or watching it has heard it before. Um, so that's one way of getting kind of like talking your way through it, saying, okay, it may sound like the same to you, but it's not necessarily to people. You're always reaching or trying to reach a fresh audience. And then the other thing I do if I get really frustrated is just kind of what I ask myself these questions like what is the point of what you're writing? What is the point of the story? What do you want to most get across to people? And I think if you kind of answer those questions and walk yourself through it, you figure out a way to kind of tell a story. Or, we've done this before where you get a bunch of video from a piece that you're putting together, a video piece you're putting together, and you just kind of scroll through it and look through it and or listen to the sound in an interview. And oftentimes might miss it during the interview, but you'll hear something that's unique or see something that's unique that you think, hey, this is really a place where I can use as a jumping off point to tell my story. So I try to do that, kind of seek a different way, seek, maybe a piece of sound or video, or a quote that I might have missed the first time around as being interesting, suddenly becomes different and a new way to tell a story.
Okay. Okay. Coming up towards the end here. Next question is, I'd say Shelly hasn't been in the journalism environment. I think I forgot what she said, how long, but I just want to know, how was it like working with Shelly? Like, how was it?
Oh my gosh. She's a force. I mean, honestly, from what I remember, she was super organized. It's very bright. Like she had such a good news mind. And she was great. I mean, besides being focused, smart, and organized. She's compassionate, which I feel like sometimes is missing in some newsrooms. You people are so focused on getting a job done and hitting a deadline that they forget sometimes that you're working with a group of people who sometimes have worked really long hours, or sacrificed a lot. And Shelley never forgot that about anyone. I think she's very compassionate, and being a compassionate leader like that is so important, especially when you're overwhelmed with an assignment. It is great to have somebody who leads you that understands, looks at you and understands that you're a person, not just somebody cranking out stories. It's somebody who, that you might be tired or you might feel emotional about a story, and Shelley just had a great way of tapping into people that way. So
Nice.
that's what I think makes her a star.
I'll next time I see her, I'll tell you said this, and she says she misses you a lot every time I talk to her. So
Oh yeah, she's great. I love her. She's just a wonderful person, a great role model. Um, yeah, she's had, you know, she's lived a really good full life, and there's so much you can learn from Shelley every time.
the last question I have for you today. In my high school, I had took a media literacy class, which is kind of what sparked my interest in journalism. I learned about something called the rule of three, and I wondered how important is that rule still like in effect in the journalism field today.
So when you say rule of three, you mean the questions you ask, like who, what, where, when,
Yeah,
type of
yeah,
thing?
yeah,
So it's funny because we have obviously experienced reporters who work here at ESPN, but sometimes they get so caught up in a million different directions, and our guidance has always been to stick with the basics. That you're not going to go wrong if you start with the basics, and that is, you know, when we get an idea that comes into us by a reporter who gets excited about a story, we will ask those questions. Well, why should we care? What's the story about? Who does it impact? I mean, those are always 100%, even as journalism evolves with social media, you always want to make sure you're answering those questions. Like, why do you feel a story is important, needs to be told, and that people will respond to it? For sure, that is a rule that should stick and continue throughout journalism. I think that's essential.
Okay. Thank you again for sparing your time to talk to me for this interview. Uh, I'll close out. This has been our special guest, Carolyn Hong, and it's been a pleasure. Signing out, Seton Hill Sports Network.
Feel like I'm running out of time, can't wait.